Hey everybody, I am here with my friend Kimberly Bell on the other side of the screen, and we are really excited to talk to you about the choices that we all have to make as entrepreneurs when it's time to hire people between hiring 1099 contractors or W-2 employees here in the States. And interestingly enough, I did get a couple of questions from a couple of Canadians as well, mostly related to pay and calculating pay. So I've handled those separately, but a lot of folks in the group and on the page queued up some questions, and we're going to go through those. Plus, I'm sure a couple more that'll come to me when Kimberly's talking to us. So first of all, Kimberly, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to give a little background here and then have Kimberly introduce herself. But I met Kimberly through a mutual friend, and we hit it off initially because I kind of strive to be the CFO who talks with entrepreneurs about accounting and finance in a way that is entrepreneur speak. And Kimberly does the same thing with law. And so I've actually been able to get a great deal of help with her for a couple of clients in a way that I can understand it, my client can understand it, and she's also creating some amazing things that I can't give too much away on that are going to help a lot more entrepreneurs a lot more cost effectively over time. But I am just blessed to know her. She's been such a huge help in addition to my friends list. And I'm so glad to have you here with us, Kimberly. Thanks for taking the time out. And if you just take a minute, kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Absolutely, and it's a pleasure to be here. So I generally go by Kim, by the way, too. Otherwise, I feel like I'm in trouble.
I will note
Perfect. So I've been an attorney for nearly 30 years, and I'm currently licensed to practice in New York, Texas, England and Wales, and Australia. And I've spent the last 14 years of my career before I actually went out on my own as a senior business advisor and senior attorney for a Fortune 20 company. So I've got a business and a legal background.
That's probably why we connect so much, because my finance background is in the industry and the Fortune 50, and it's translating it all into something that makes sense for entrepreneurs and doesn't bog them down with red tape.
Exactly, and as you know, I'm pretty plain spoken, so
Thank goodness. Yeah. So, well, thank you so much for hopping on here. Do you want to give a little background on the 1099 W-2 question in the States and sort of where it is? And then I've got a list of some questions that people asked that will pop out to you one at a time.
Absolutely. So there's been a bit of noise recently. I think a lot of your Facebook group have raised the issue of the ABC test. And also the Uber case. So let's start with a little bit of background about the ABC test. It's a lot of noise. It's not actually anything that new. So what I'm going to give you, Pam, for everybody to have a look at is a couple of presentation slides, one of which is a comparison of all the states that actually use the ABC test at the moment.
Oh, fantastic. People will be so grateful for that.
So while a lot of people are saying this is all new and it's changing everything, it's not really. So
Okay.
the case came out of California. And California is the place where a lot of stuff happens and it trickles down to the rest of the country. One of the things that the commentators haven't really been focusing on is that the case, and we're talking about the Dynamex case, doesn't actually apply wholesale to the consideration of who a contractor is. It actually just applies in the limited case of work orders. And that to basically laws which set minimum wage standards like hours and pay. That's not to say that it's not going to apply in a broader sense in future, but what we should all bear in mind that the main thing that came out of it was essentially that in that limited context in California, there is a presumption that somebody will be an employee unless you can prove that they're a contractor.
Okay.
So
So the state will assume
There,
that, right? The state will assume that it's an employee unless you can prove otherwise.
exactly. So what I'd really like to do when we talk about this is to give everybody some tips and techniques that they can use to actually head the issue off at the pass. So if you can satisfy a lot of these criteria, it should go a long way to actually helping prove that what you're dealing with is an independent contractor, or if you're actually choosing to deal with somebody as an employee, that you're actually doing that. Because
Great.
in practice, it's very easy to actually fall one way or the other without intending to do so.
Oh, okay. So there's some tips that we can use to make sure that if we intentionally want to fall one way or the other, that we do it. And folks, don't worry about taking notes or anything. Kimberly has created beautiful handouts for this that I will add in the comments below because she's offered to make that available to everybody. So thank you for that. But you can just relax and listen with a glass of wine or a cup of tea and then do the hard studying later on. Go ahead, Kimberly. Thanks.
Perfect. So why don't we start with just having a look at what the consequences might be if you have hired someone as an independent contractor and it turns out that they're actually an employee. So there's a few things that make getting the distinction right really important. If you actually find that you've hired someone and they inadvertently are held to be an employee, what you're going to be responsible for is the employer and employee share of Social Security and Medicare, income tax that should have been withheld, federal unemployment income tax.
Wow.
Yeah, the list is going on. Employee state income tax, unemployment compensation taxes, and if the worker is injured on the job, for failing to pay workers' compensation under your workers' compensation policy.
So let me just be clear on this. I'm not just responsible for their missed basically self-employment tax, that's 6.5%. I'm now responsible for income taxes that would have been withheld from them. So if they had paid their income taxes like they should have, the government's actually getting double income tax from them. Or is it only if they haven't paid?
If they haven't paid, they're going to probably...
Okay. Okay. Good, good. So for everything except that FICA piece and the employer taxes and unemployment, for the employee income tax, if they've paid it, we won't have to pay it.
Well, you may end up having a fight with the IRS,
Got
so it's worth not to get into that can of worms if you can avoid it, and that's what we're going to try and hopefully help people do.
Okay, so I want to put some perspective on this for people just so they understand what we're saying about the consequences, that we're not kind of joking around here. So let's just say that you paid a contractor $10,000 in a year, and I don't know if you counted, but Kimberly listed, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 different taxes we'd be responsible for. So if you add all those up, I'm just doing the math in my head here, it's like 14.5 plus assume an income tax rate, say of 25%, and you might have some unemployment taxes and other type things that might add up to another percent. When you add all that up, that is 40.5% of that total number. So if you have 3 employees that you're paying $30,000 for, 3 contractors, and in total you've paid them $30,000 already, what this is saying is you could be getting ready to spend another $12,000 to pay the government if they're classified wrong. So that's no joke. And if you multiply that by 10, if it's 300,000, it's 120,000. So I was thinking it was actually only this relatively small 14.5% or whatever that comes out to. But folks, my ears are perking up even more than they were already. So this is serious business. Okay, go on.
So the other thing to bear in mind too, there may be penalties and fines. The other thing, this is not something that necessarily the IRS is going to tweak to because, as everybody knows, they're not doing as much auditing in the last couple of years as they have historically done. Where you're likely to get in trouble is somebody becomes aggrieved and they actually report you to the IRS. If that's the case, you may also find yourself on the receiving end of a lawsuit. I don't want to go all doom and gloom on you, though. That is an absolute worst case scenario. And what we're going to do is give you the tools to make sure that doesn't happen in the first place.
Awesome. Let me ask a really quick question. If there were a lawsuit, would it be from the IRS?
No, it would be the individual.
Okay, got it. So if somebody leaves mad and they've been a contractor, then they could report this to the IRS, and whether they win or not, and whether they file their own lawsuit or not, you've got to go through the hassle of proving this was really a contractor. Okay, so we're done with the doom and gloom, folks, all right? So let's talk about how you make sure you don't get into this situation. And that's why we have Kimberly here, is to make sure we don't get there. But if your accountants or your lawyers or your tax accountants are telling you to think about this, given the extent of that penalty, it's important to think about this. I know it's painful, but it's really important to think about it, because you don't want to expose yourself to that kind of a risk, paying basically almost half of somebody's salary again to the federal government if we've got them classified wrong. So as well as we can forecast, that's not something we want to build into your forecast. Okay, Kimberly, back to you.
So there's a couple of tests we're going to look at. The first one is the general law test, which is the one that's been around forever. It has come out of a multitude of court cases. And it basically gives, and this is in the spreadsheet, that handout that will be provided.
Oh, perfect.
It gives a number of tests, and they range from issues such as the degree of control over how the work is performed, the expertise the person has, their hours of work, place of work, their relationship with the employer, the expectation of work, scope of work, risk involved, benefits, tools and equipment, training, tax, methods of payment, leave, and the ability to work for others. When we consider the ABC test, which is the one that's getting all of the attention out of California.
Yeah, can you just do a quick rundown on what that ABC test is, or is that what you're about to do?
That's what I'm about to do.
Awesome, awesome.
So actually, let's even take a step back. The way it came up was this case, which basically involved a company that hired people to deliver papers and packages. And what they essentially did was they were very clever and decided that they were going to change everybody who'd previously been an employee to a contractor. And the net result for them was going to be that they would save a whole lot of money, most notably all of the things that we've just talked about. So they were a little bit too clever for their own good, and the employees the former employees got very annoyed and they sued the company. So this is where, and one of the things that they were aggrieved about was not getting a minimum wage. So what the court, and it was the Supreme Court of California, came out with was this ABC test. As I read through the different elements of it, and there's three, although I would say there's actually 4 criteria as part of it, but what you'll see is there's a lot of overlap between the common law tests that we read out just a moment ago. So this is where I'm getting back to. This is not all new. So there's the first 3 parts, and you have to satisfy all 3 in order for somebody to be an independent contractor. So the first part is that the worker is free from the control and direction of the hiring entity in relation to how they perform the work, both under the contract, so what you say in the contract, but also in fact. So what that's getting to is you can't simply say in a contract that a person is called an independent contractor and that they have full authority to do the work in the way that they choose, and then turn around and direct them how to do everything. The second point, and actually it's worth noting that that's the principal test that the IRS looks at as well.
Okay, and so the key there is the how. We can't tell them how they have to do their work. Now let me dive in on that a minute. Does that mean I can't give them processes to follow?
So the IRS gives a little bit more guidance about that particular test, and they apply
Okay.
3 additional tests. That is behavioral control,
Okay.
the right to direct how the worker performs specific tasks rather than just the end result. So if you're saying to somebody, this is what I want in the end, but I don't dive down into, and I want you to do it this way and follow this process and deliver this particular piece of information and talk to this person and get very granular about it, they're going to be an employee if you start crossing that line.
Okay.
The IRS also looks at financial control. It looks at things like unreimbursed expenses. If you are reimbursing the person for all of their business-related expenses, insofar as they relate to the work that they're doing for you, they're going to start like an employee.
Huh. Okay.
And finally, the relationship. It's how you perceive the relationship between you and that person. And the thing to bear in mind there is this concept of people being annoyed with you. So you might feel very happy saying, oh, they're just a contractor. But if they feel like they're doing the work of an employee, that perception could be different on both sides.
Yep. Okay. So that's all the A in ABC?
That's the A.
That's the A. So if I were to summarize that, it would be they're in control of the how they do things. You essentially have said to them, I want this deliverable, I want this end result, and said, I'm not giving you a procedure, I'm not giving you a process, I'm telling you that's what I want out of this. So that's pretty clear, right, in the case of somebody like me who is consulting on financial stuff. So I'll get with one of my one-on-one clients or with my group, and I'll say, here's what I'm going to deliver you at the end of the day. I'm determining how I'm going to do it, what I'm going to do. But say, for example, let's just take, and this is a little scary, right, for folks. Let's take a bookkeeper and say that you say to the bookkeeper, I want you to use this chart of accounts, or I want you to classify my expenses this way. Is that considered control?
So
you think?
Let's come back to that in a moment.
Okay, gotcha.
Criteria. And also, one of the things that the California legislature has done has introduced a bill which addresses different categories of people who sort of put up their hands and said, hey, we don't want to be covered by this test. We want you to come up with
okay. Okay.
Get back to that in a second.
All right. So the A is how, is the control over the how.
Exactly. Control and direction.
Okay. All right. What's the B?
The B is the person will only be an independent contractor if the work is outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business. So what that means in real people language is you can't hire someone to perform similar duties to those that your employees are already doing.
Wow.
For example, what they're essentially saying is, and this is my interpretation, if, for example, you have a really busy time of year and you need more people to help you get all of your accounts done for tax season, the way I'm reading this is to say that if you're bringing extra bookkeepers in to do the same job as existing bookkeepers, they're not actually going to be independent contractors, they're going to be temporary employees.
Yeah, and that's not just for your kind of superpower. That's not just for your core competency. That's for anything you're currently performing in your organization. Similar to existing employee role.
So
wow.
If you are trying to fall within the independent contractor side of things, you need to show that it's a job that can be outsourced.
Got it.
So So let's move on to C if you're okay with that.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so the workers must be customarily engaged in an independent business.
Okay.
This is where we're talking about particular categories of people who, when someone says, I'm a contractor, you would think to yourself, yeah, that makes sense. So to give a little more clarity there, what they've said is it's workers who are in an independent trade, business, or profession in which they offer their services to the general public.
Got it. So independent trade, business, or profession.
Exactly.
Like bookkeeping, for example.
So this is where both the IRS and the California legislature have given us a little bit of guidance.
Okay.
So these are the types of people that they have highlighted.
Ah, cool. Is this on your handout as well?
This is not, but I think
okay, cool. I'll write them up. And they've highlighted them as contractors or as employees?
As contractors.
Okay, so these are some sample contractors. I'm ready.
Exactly. So barbers or hairdressers.
Yeah.
Massage therapists.
Yeah.
CPAs, you'll be pleased to hear.
VAs?
CPAs, accountants.
Okay.
Freelance artists.
Ah, okay, that's good. That's big because we got a lot of copywriters that could fall under that. Okay, cool. Musicians as well. Okay.
Chiropractors.
Okay.
Vets.
Okay.
Construction contractors.
Okay.
Public stenographers. I don't know about you, but I don't know a whole
Yeah,
lot.
I won't pop that up there. That won't be too relevant.
And then we've got doctors, dentists, vets, lawyers, and auctioneers.
All right, I'll say medical profession, lawyer. Okay.
Isn't it great that the lawyers have seen fit to look after themselves?
Yes, indeed, isn't it? Gotta love that. Okay, so really what we're saying here is everybody here is licensed.
Exactly.
Huh.
With the exception of the freelance artists, possibly.
Yeah, you're right.
But what you would say in their case, if you're trying to draw a distinction, is that they have a special set of skills.
Got it. Okay.
It's not sort of necessarily out there in abundance in the community.
So I could argue bookkeeping is that as well. I mean, it is a special set of skills to do the bookkeeping for somebody. It's a special set of skills.
Well, bear in mind, if you've already got a bookkeeper who works internally for you, you're going to fall foul of
yeah, no, I'm just kind of thinking of my clients. If they don't have a bookkeeper internally and they're making a decision between contractor or employee, the only place they'd have to be careful is that A, and say, instead of I want you to classify my expenses this way, they say on a monthly basis, I want the output of these reports and I want to be able to see this level of detail.
That sounds right, but
cool.
Without knowing a whole lot more than that.
That gives me a lot of clarity too, because I often get people set up. I act as their CFO. I don't do the bookkeeping myself. I find them a bookkeeper. And that tells me that when we define the bookkeeper's work, we need to define it as outputs. Beautiful. Okay, cool. All right, so I need to get a massage therapist, a chiropractor, and a lawyer. And not only will I be more comfortable, but I'll be able to count them all as contractors.
Sounds like a bad 3 people walked into a bar joke.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Okay, cool.
Okay, so we've gone through A, B, and C, and as I mentioned, there's probably a D that you don't hear people talk about. And that requirement is the contractor must actually be in business for themselves. So previously, one of the I hesitate to use the word tricks, but one of the things that people have done historically to try and fall on the contractor side of the spectrum is to make sure that they're incorporated themselves. So when they're hired by someone, the employer is not actually hiring the individual, they're hiring the individual's company.
Got it. Does
So,
that do the trick?
well, what this new guidance is basically saying is the question isn't whether the employer themselves prevented or prohibited that person from engaging in work for other people. The real test is whether the contractor has independently made the decision that they're going to go into business for themselves.
Does that mean they have to have registered with the state, and really have set up themselves as a business, or could they be a non-registered sole proprietor and it still counts?
You would be skirting, I would not regard that as
okay. So for people in business that want to be hired by others as a contractor, this gives me one more piece of ammunition to convince them they should set up a business entity. Okay, cool.
And
got that, folks? There's another important reason to set up a business entity. It helps allow you to be hired by others as a contractor if they're fearful of getting caught in this trap.
And I would not, if I was doing business myself, I would not have any hesitation in incorporating or setting up a business.
Mm-hmm.
Provided you choose the right entity for your circumstances, it's the way to go.
Yeah. Well, there are other protections and stuff that you get. It also helps for setting up separate business accounts and there's all sorts of things. We can do a whole other broadcast on that one, I think.
Absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so ABC is really ABCD.
Okay, so when the court had a look at the Dynamics case, what they basically said, and I alluded to this a little bit earlier, was the test only applies, their ABC test only applies to wage order claims. And they highlighted the fact that the previous court decision in a case called Borrello continues to apply. We don't need to go into all of the facts of that, but basically the Borrello test says that the most significant consideration is the control test, which is letter A. And then they give a list of about 20 other factors. And it will come as no surprise to everybody that those factors are very similar to the ones that we read out right at the beginning. So you've got a cross-pollination of ideas here. Okay,
got it. So to pursue this, these issues are usually raised by the states individually, right?
Well, they usually result from somebody suing an employer. And
then
the legislature responds with legislation.
Okay, so it's interesting because one of the places this has reared its head for me is I'm a treasurer for a not-for-profit choir. And they hire their singers via contract for the individual events. And, it's the majority of the cost is to pay the singers, right? So we actually got a notice for an audit by the state. We passed and they were able to remain categorized as 1099 employees. But there was nobody who triggered that. It was just they saw this organization and they said, oh, wow, we might be able to nab something there. And it's interesting because I had another friend who was running a not-for-profit Shakespeare company in New York. And New York came down on them and said, hey, these are employees. And they ended up having to fight a long harangue over that. So it also sounds to me a little bit like states who may be in need of funding might identify opportunities for pursuing it on their own.
Potentially, but I think one of the questions that somebody else asked is, has there been any other litigation in other states?
Yes.
And there has. To give you an example of how confusing it gets, New Jersey and New York have both had cases recently, and the New Jersey decision said that the workers in question were employees, and the New York court said they were contractors. So it gets to the other consideration is, well, what law applies to everybody? So federal laws that apply to people, and then there's all the state laws. So rather than get everybody bogged down and worried about whether they're complying with all of these individual laws, I think what makes a whole lot more sense is to give people some things that they can do in practice to
Awesome.
try and deal with it in the real world. Because I don't know about you, but if I don't ever have to read another case, I'll be very happy. And I don't know anybody who wants to know the Dynamics decision in 2000 and whatever said this, and this was the dissenting judgment.
We certainly don't have any time for that. That's true. So yeah, great point. Is there kind of a list of sort of awesome? And that's one of your handouts, isn't it?
It's not, but I'm going to give you.
Okay, I will draw on the board while we talk. Great, thank you.
So I'll actually.
This is the key. I will mark this time point in the broadcast because this is the part that people are is really juicy for entrepreneurs. Okay.
So, as the old saying goes, the best defense is a good offense.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is making sure that your contracts contain some specific information, and also making sure that you actually do some things when you're hiring your independent contractor.
Okay.
So the things that your contract needs to do is to spell out the worker's responsibilities and how payment is to be determined for each job.
All right, and here we should really say outcomes, right? Because not necessarily, okay, responsibility and outcome, and I'll say without instructions. Instructions on how. Okay.
We'll be able to say, you'll be able to give the milestones and deadlines to get work done.
Okay, so milestones, okay, awesome.
The person should be able to hire their own assistants or their own workers. And just a side note there, if they do that, they're going to have to make sure that those workers have workers' compensation insurance. And if you are hiring an independent contractor, always check that they've got general liability insurance and workers' comp insurance if they have. So general liability insurance in every instance, workers' comp insurance if they've got their own employees.
That's key. And to do that, should they issue a certificate or do they just need to?
So basically what you will do is get them to get their insurance broker to provide a certificate of currency.
Okay.
One of the practical issues with that is you get that certificate on day one.
Yep.
Fortunately, it's not an evergreen certificate, so you don't know at any point in time if they've done something to either void their insurance or they've cancelled it, or they haven't paid a premium.
And let me tell you, I just went through with another client, not on an audit for 1099 versus W-2, but on a workers' comp audit. And we had to provide certificates of insurance from every single one of our subcontractors. So that's a key point there too. Okay, cool.
You want the contractor to be responsible for supplying all or most of their tools, equipment, and material needed to do the job.
Okay, this actually comes to one of my group's questions.
Exactly.
And let me just hone in on that again. Basically, it said, if I bring in a contractor for a 3-month assignment, can I give them a computer without the IRS raising a hairy eyeball?
So the answer to that is there's never one factor that's determinative of the question. And I'm going to give you that horrible lawyer response.
It depends. Yeah. So if you check, maybe the best way to say is if you can check all the other boxes and all you're doing is giving them a computer, you might be safe. But the other answer is also, it's not necessarily just the IRS. They could complain to your state or to your district or to your Commonwealth if the employee doesn't. So if it's somebody you trust, know, like, and trust, and you can check all the other boxes, go ahead and hand them a computer. Again, this isn't, encouraging that, but it is saying that they're going to look at the whole case, not just the specific item.
Exactly. And without knowing all of the other facts, it's just not enough information to say whether that's going to tip it one way or
Move
the
the needle.
other.
Okay, cool.
Summary is perfect.
Great. All right, good. Well, I'll make sure that we point that out as well.
Perfect. So a few other points. We've talked again about the maximum possible freedom to choose how they do it.
Yeah. So that should be in the contract is what you're saying.
Exactly. You need to give them, avoid a commitment to reimburse business expenses.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So where that comes up, one of the things that people need to think about is instead of going for hourly rates or weekly rates, consider coming up with a per job rate, which is inclusive of all of the costs that you would generally carry as an independent contractor. So your insurance costs, your equipment costs, your things like reimbursement for hotel accommodation for travel might be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But you're probably best to try and come up with a lump sum fee if that's at all doable.
Yeah, if you can do it that way, that makes sense. That looks a little better than the hourly rate is what I'm hearing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay,
I know that's
cool.
not always possible, but if it is possible, that's the way to go.
Cool. Okay.
If you do that and you find that you're actually doing more work than you anticipate, there's nothing to stop you from agreeing to a change to your contract where you up the amount of the value.
Got it. Okay, cool. So there are workarounds for
Exactly.
this to make sure you don't lose that compensation. Okay.
And what I like to remind people too is in nearly 30 years of practice, I have never seen a problem that cannot be solved.
I love that. Don't lead with no is my favorite saying with entrepreneurs is there are ways. Just get the right people in your corner.
Exactly.
Yep.
You might
Very
not
cool.
always like them as much as you would hope, but
And they're legal and ethical ways. I'm not at all implying that either of us would say, we got to go off the ledge on this one. Both of us find the ways to do things that are both legal and ethical. So that's key part of this.
okay, so there's a few more categories. Don't provide employee type benefits such as vacation leave, health insurance, or retirement plans.
Okay, yep.
Make it clear that the contractor is free to offer services to other businesses.
How about competitors? Can you limit their ability to offer their services to your competitors and still get clear on that?
You can. I would, it's sort of a separate issue that I like to point out to people too. Everybody likes to bind people to non-compete agreements.
Yes.
Which by and large are not enforceable, or you can have more difficulty enforcing. One of the things that I invite people to consider as an alternative is a non-solicitation agreement combined with a confidentiality agreement. And you don't need separate agreements, you build it all into the one agreement. But the non-solicitation agreement basically says you won't steal our clients, customers, suppliers, or employees.
Yep.
But it doesn't prevent them from actually trying to earn a living.
I love that. And I've actually heard that as well. So that would tend also to lead towards the fact that you don't want to limit their ability to work with others, but if you're covered under confidentiality in this particular case, you're not going to be, and I have a lot of that. I have a lot of clients in the same space. I give every one of them an NDA or a CDA, a non-disclosure or a confidentiality agreement, and they know that their secrets are safe in the vault.
And the other thing that you might want to consider there is proving loss in the case of somebody using your confidential information is incredibly difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So an alternative to use is to come up with an agreed amount of liquidated damages.
Okay.
If you breach this obligation, I don't have to prove any actual loss. We have agreed up front that the loss that I say I will suffer is $5,000.
I love that. And so if you breach it and the court says, yep, there's a breach, then boom, that's the amount. There's no second trial trying to figure out how much it should be.
Which is, and it's almost impossible to prove.
Brilliant. Love that. Love that. Love that. Love that. And it's very easy to prove if it's in the contract what that amount's going to be. So clients of mine, be aware of this, right? So, and not just clients of mine, but anybody listening to this, if you're going to hire somebody to do some work for you and you're worried about your intellectual property getting stolen, one of the things you can do is put up front, hey, if it's determined that you've done this, I don't have to prove you cost me $100,000. We're going to say right now that if I prove you did this, you're going to pay me X, no matter what. Okay, great. I love that.
Awesome. So there's 2 more points to put in sorry, 3 more points. They don't go in the contract, but they're actual real world things that you can do to create your universe that shows that this is not an employee relationship.
Okay.
Really easy. Don't pay them through your normal payroll system.
Ah, I got a question about that, but okay.
Don't give them a copy of the employee handbook. And if you've got more than 2 employees, you should have an employee handbook.
There's another very important aside. Don't give employee, okay.
And most importantly, and this is my favorite, is to keep a file. And in that file, you're going to include copies of the independent contractor's business card.
Okay.
Correspondence on his letterhead or her letterhead. Any advertisements that they might put on social media or in the paper. Their employee identification number. And what all of this does is to actually demonstrate that out in the real world, this person is a contractor serving other businesses.
Perfect. 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 I'm going to jump in here now and ask 2 more questions based on this. So there are now some payroll systems and PEOs actually that, and one example, I mean, I hate to name one, but I know a lot of people who use it, say Gusto, where you can pay your employees and you can pay your contractors out of Gusto. They keep it separate. So there's a payroll run and there's a contractor run. Okay. That's okay, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wouldn't like set them up to get if I'm doing my own payroll, which I hope nobody's doing, by the way. But if I'm doing my own payroll, I don't want to also pay the contractor the same time, the same day, the same way. And along that lines, is it safe to say that you should always get an invoice?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And this is something that a couple of my clients have not done in the past. They pay them hourly and they just pay them hourly. And if it's a 1099 employee, make sure you have an invoice for every payment. Okay. Don't give the employee the handbook. I think that's great. That's a great tip. And then this is fantastic. I had never thought about this. So basically keep my own little set of proof that, hey, this person's out there doing this work for other people.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. Okay, cool. So let me I want to hit another couple questions here. I think we've hit them all in this conversation, but let me make sure. I'm going to read these out loud. Love to hear thoughts. Oh, go ahead.
There was one question about if you incorporate in a different state and how that can help you.
Oh, there we go. If I am in one of the states with the ABC laws, can I incorporate or register my business in a non-ABC law state? If so, would there be any issues that could come about? If I can't, what would I as a business owner be in control of doing if a client wants to work with me but is unsure of how the laws would affect them?
Okay, so a couple of things to think about here. The question I want everybody to get in the habit of asking themselves is, what's the nexus here? So the court always looks at what's the fundamental connection between the people who are doing things here. So just by incorporating somewhere else, it's what the courts call a phantom or a sham. It's a very obvious way of trying to get around a particular situation. So to give you another example of that is when you create a contract with somebody. If you decide that you want the governing law to be in New York because it's convenient for you, but all of the work is actually being done in Texas, the court's going to say, unless the person you're contracting with specifically agreed to that and they had an opportunity to negotiate the contract and that term, we're not going to hold the other party to that responsibility.
Oh, okay.
So it's the same sort of thing here. You've got to look where the main work is being done. I'll give you another example. One of the employment obligations is that you have to put up posters in your place of work which give employees notice of the laws that they are entitled to get the benefit of. If you have remote workers who obviously can't see the notice board where all of those posters are, you still have an obligation to give them those notices.
Mm-hmm.
And what the law will say is a lot of the time it's where that employee is situated is going to be one of the factors that you need to take into account in determining what laws apply. Okay,
great. Great. So, I'm gonna summarize this because it's like answers 3 of his questions. And that is that yes, you can register in another state, but the bottom line is when it comes down to this particular issue, they're going to base it based on where the work is done.
Exactly.
So that's sort of the short answer there. Very likely. Then the second is if both myself and my client are registered as LLCs or S Corps, would there be less likelihood of legal action in regards to the ABC laws? And I think we talked about the fact that, if you're registered as an entity, that certainly helps. And then the next one is if I bring people onto my own team, would I need to be bringing them on as employees because of the ABC laws in my state? I think, again, that depends on the test and how you answer the test. One of the things I think it's very important that we say on this broadcast is that nothing that we say here affects a situation in isolation, right? So if we're answering your question without having all the facts, this is not legal advice by any stretch. This is sharing of our understanding right now of the current legal environment. So with these situations, if it's close, if you've got a question you can't answer, you really should seek legal counsel on this particular matter because we talked about how damaging it can be.
The other point, the key word that last question had is if I bring someone onto my team.
Yeah, great point.
That sounds like an employee to me.
That's a team member. That would be the initial reaction from the government. Okay, and this person says, I want to be able to do the right thing all around, but still remain a functioning business and be compliant with both federal and state laws. That's not really a question. They're just commenting on why they really want to understand this. And I think that's fantastic. And they don't make it easy to be compliant. That's for darn sure. We answered the one about the computer. This is an interesting one. This is from my friend Kathy. Said, it's been commonplace to hire interns, quite often unpaid interns. Is this something that's working around the edges of the law, or is it actually a violation?
It's illegal with a few limited exceptions, and there's a 7-point test.
Okay.
There's a lot of criteria that you need to actually be able to establish to do it legally. But fundamentally, free interns are a no-no.
Okay.
No such thing as a volunteer when it comes to a private business.
Oh, okay. Well, that's very important to know. I'm going to actually ask a broader question than that because what my friend is saying, and I think you've reiterated that, if someone's been hired to do a job, I'm reading off the computer screen over here. That's why I keep looking over. If someone has been hired to do a job that a business needs done in order to thrive, he or she must be paid. Interns and volunteers are only legal in the case of doing non-vital work.
Volunteers are never legal.
Volunteers. Okay, so that's actually interesting. So let's talk about not-for-profits then. I'll pull another example. I have a not-for-profit that I do accounting work for. I do it as a volunteer. That's not a legal structure?
No, because the key there is it's not-for-profit.
Okay, so if it's not for profit, you can volunteer.
I believe so, but
okay, very interesting.
otherwise you can't have volunteers.
Okay, Kathy, that's interesting. I hope that answers your question, but it sounds like you're right about the fact that with very rare exceptions, unpaid interns are not a go-to.
The other thing to bear in mind there is if you have an intern, they have to be included on your workers' comp insurance, so make sure you do.
Okay, got it. I have almost sucked up an hour of your time here, and I really appreciate it. And I know that everybody who's going to get to listen to this appreciates it. Folks, this is Kimberley Bell. I am glad to make a connection with you. She's in my Facebook group. She's on my Facebook page. Feel free to reach out to her via Facebook. But Kimberley, is there any other way that people could reach you directly?
Yeah, Facebook's probably the best for the moment.
Cool.
As you know, I'm setting up my other business and don't want to give people a Gmail address just at this point.
Perfect.
Professional.
All right, so that's great. So reach out via Facebook, and that's where we're showing this, so that makes a ton of sense. We're going to put these really nice handouts that Kimberly has put together, or Kim has put together. She's not in trouble. Summarizing a lot of what we've said today in case you don't have a chance to listen to all this right through at once. I'm also going to put a few key time indexes in that should help them, Kim, find particular issues that they might be interested in as well on the video. And we will upload this to Facebook, pop in the attachments, and I think that's probably a wrap, but I know that I have learned a ton. I'm going to include a list of my surprises in the comments, and I look forward to continuing to work with you because I have a lot of clients that can use the kind of down-to-earth sensibility that you have in that same approach, which is, we're not going to lead with no. We're going to figure out a way to do what needs to be done for the business based on the outcome that the entrepreneur has in mind. Both ethically and legally. So thanks a ton for jumping in here on this. It's been fantastic.
Awesome.
All right. Take care, and we will see you soon.
Excellent.
All right. Bye-bye now.